Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. The beginning of a calendar year is often associated with New Year's resolutions, and unfortunately, statistically speaking, many of those tend to go sideways, if you will, before long. But whether or not you engage in New Year's resolutions, this time of year may be a very good idea for many of you to take a look at goals that are related to your work, to your profession. So this time of year may be the exact right time to consider some new work goals. Considering how poorly personal goals can go during this time of year for so many different reasons, it may be a better idea to spend your time and energy working on some new and more beneficial work goals instead. As you look at your own work environment, your own work development, how you are doing professionally, consider whether it's time to set some new work goals, some new professional goals. You're probably already aware of the acronym SMART for SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. That is still a good idea. That's something that can always be helpful when setting goals. So keep the acronym SMART in mind as you consider some new work goals or new professional goals. That's always a good idea to keep in mind when working with goals. And that is as relevant for professional or work goals as it is for personal goals. But here we want to go beyond just setting SMART goals. It's important to make your goals meaningful and exciting, and that is both in terms of the professional consideration and your personal consideration. Just because a goal is a good goal for you professionally, if it's something that you're not excited about, you probably won't be as diligent and as driven when it comes to achieving that goal. So it's important to be very selective with these goals. That's one thing that will help you to be successful in achieving your goals. Make sure that they are relevant but also exciting, both on a professional level and on a personal level. There's nothing worse than an achievement that doesn't excite you, that took up time, energy, and resources, and at the end of it all, you couldn't care less that you achieved it. So make sure when you're considering work goals, you are paying attention to the worthiness of those goals, if you will. Are these goals that will not only be helpful to you and make sense to you in terms of work, in terms of your professional advancement and growth, but will you also be excited about these goals on a personal level? Don't just set goals because that seems to be the next step in your professional development, or because others' input suggests that those are the goals you should engage in as the next step. And while that may very well be part of the reality, that some of the goals that you select may be exactly what you need to do professionally and maybe what others are advising you to do, but beyond that, they have to be meaningful and exciting to you. Something else that can be very helpful is the idea of starting at the end. When you're considering a goal, think about what it's going to be like once you've achieved that goal. What will it feel like? What will it do for you professionally? What will it do for you personally? And what will you have to do in order to get to that place? What steps will you have to take to get to that end result, to get to that point where you have achieved that goal? So look at the finish line, if you will, and then work your way backwards to see what it is that you will have to do to achieve that goal. That's how you want to formulate your plan of action. This is the surest way of knowing where you're going to end up, because you're starting at the end. And as I already mentioned, make sure that you're making these SMART goals using the acronym SMART, so that you're making the best of your efforts. But the focus here is making sure that you are very, very selective about your goals. The idea isn't to set as many goals as possible. The idea isn't to please everyone else. The idea is to be very selective and to be most pleased yourself at the end once you achieve your goals. So you may end up with simply one goal. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with working on one goal at a time. We live in a society where we're supposed to do everything all the time. And maybe for some of you, the idea of the more goals I have, the more things I have to achieve, the better it will be. But that's not necessarily the truth. You want to give your focus, your time, your energy to something in such a way where you're really giving it a good go, where you're really giving it your best efforts to achieve such a goal. So rather than spreading yourself too thin, it may make sense for you to focus on one professional goal at a time, on one work goal at a time. But the bottom line is, take the opportunity of this time of year where so many people focus on New Year's resolutions. Focus on professional goals, on work goals instead, and be very, very selective so that at the end, once you've achieved your goal, it's something for you to be proud of, something that will benefit you, and something that will make you happy as well. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. New Year's tends to be the time for New Year's resolutions, but statistically speaking, many of those resolutions fizzle out within weeks. Instead of setting yourself up for failure, why not focus on work goals or professional goals instead? And while using the SMART goals as a way of approaching your goal selection and goal achievement, we need to go beyond that. The idea here presented in this episode is to be very, very selective, making your goals ones that make sense for you professionally, but also personally. Make them meaningful and exciting as well. And don't think that you have to have too many goals on your to-do list. You may want to focus on working on one goal at a time, making it possible for you to give your focus, time, and energy to that one goal instead of spreading yourself too thin. So why not take the opportunity at the beginning of the year to focus on some professional goals, on some work goals, and select one or more than one if you want to, and truly go for it. Make sure it's meaningful and exciting to you both professionally and personally. As the week unfolds, I invite you to consider where you're going in terms of your own career. What is your work and your work future looking like, and what can you do to move forward, to advance it in some way that is meaningful to you? You may be fortunate enough to work for a company, for an organization, or for a manager who is proactive in developing your career and helping you to develop professionally, but many people are not. And so it's up to you to take on that development project personally and make sure that you're advancing and moving forward in whatever way you want it to happen. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of the podcast. The link for that is in the description below. My YouTube channel, which is Stress Free with Dr. G, also contains videos that focus on stress management, so I invite you to check that out. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.